It was Christmas Eve. I was 9 years old. Me and Mum were decorating the tree, waiting for Dad to come home from work. A couple of hours went by. Dad wasn't home. So Mum called the office. No answer. Christmas Day came and went and still nothing. So the police began a search. 4 or 5 days went by. Neither of us could eat or sleep. Everything was falling apart. It was snowing outside. The house was freezing. So I went to try and light up the fire. That's when I noticed the smell. The firemen came and broke through the chimney top, and me and Mum, we were expecting to pull out a dead cat or a bird. And instead, they pulled out my father. He was dressed in a Santa Claus suit. He'd been climbing down the chimney. His arms were loaded with presents. He was going to surprise us. He slipped and broke his neck. He died instantly. And that's how I found out there was no Santa Claus. Merry Christmas, everyone! In case that wasn't obvious, this week we are covering Joe Dante and Steven Spielberg's 1984 classic Gremlins, one of the most beloved and downright dark Christmas movies ever made. I mean, are all Christmas movies just mega dark now? I mean, Scrooge last week, A Wonderful Life is largely miserable. I mean, even Christmas Vacation, he had to, basically have a nervous breakdown before he turned the corner in that film. After all these films, I'm starting to think I'm waiting to watch Die Hard to cheer me up, a bit of, domestic terrorism.
Look at Home Alone. That was dark as well. Like, it's a kid being left home alone, and he's dealing with thieves who intentionally want to kill him by the end because of what he's done. It's a dark film. It's clearly a dark season. Well, certainly Phoebe Cates thinks so. We haven't picked the jovial film. Like, I think I need to go and watch some of these, Hallmark made for Christmas films at the moment just to feel better.
Well, obviously that's the famous quote from the famous story that Phoebe Cates tells. But she also says the line, some are opening up presents while others are opening up their wrists. This is a Christmas film. Like, the real monsters are supposed to be the Gremlins. No, it's just the dark nature of Christmas that is inherent throughout this film. That's the real horror of this film, is the season itself, not the monsters that make up the title of the movie. It's absolutely insane.
I picture Kate, played by Phoebe Cates, walking through the town, people going Merry Christmas to her, and instantly she's just going, fuck off. She's
Wait. It's weird because she's otherwise like the most jovial character. She's like outrageously nice. She's like mega pretty. She's got on like these super cheese, she's one of the most attractive women of the 80s. And yet they try and make her look so kind of dowdy and homely, like with that kind of dress she's wearing at the bank. But everything about her, it's all smiles and cheer until anybody brings up Christmas. And seriously, I mean, how could you be unhappy in that town if you take the Gremlins out of the equation? It's like the most picture-perfect Christmas town in the world because it's basically Back to the Future with snow.
Yeah. Well, now you know how you can be unhappy in that town. Your dad is stuck in a chimney and you basically cooked him.
In fairness, right, I'm giving her a hard time. If you go back to that story, I don't think I would enjoy Christmas and she's the one who found him. It's like 5 days of him missing. So you go to light the fire, you're cooking him.
Yes.
And you're like, wait, what's that smell? Is that chicken? Is that, I can't tell. No, it's coming from behind. Oh, it must be a pigeon. No, it's a father in a Santa suit, half cooked with his neck broken, already decomposing after 5 days. Jesus Christ. That's dark as fuck.
You light your fire and you go, is somebody cooking barbecue at Christmas?
Wait, is that my dad being burnt? No. It's okay. It's okay. He's already dead. It's absolutely fine. But even if you take Phoebe Cates' ultra dark stories out of this film, it's still a pretty dark movie. But it's one where I feel like maybe more so than most is so dictated by the score. Like the score, like it goes from like really dark, like borderline horror, especially when the mum's being attacked in the kitchen. When I was growing up, I always thought that as being a particularly dark scene. But it's always offset by that jovial soundtrack. And I can't remember a film where the score is nearly as prevalent as this. And sometimes I think it actually goes a little bit overboard. You think of characters, and I'm not quite sure what they were going for, but what's her name? The evil woman who seems, Mrs. Deagle.
Yeah.
Who's like so needlessly evil. And it's what it reminded me of was, remember when we did the Goonies? And we were like, does like that kid's dad like own the entire town? That seems to be the same thing here, because everyone's so scared of her, so upset, like, oh, we don't upset her, even though she's such an evil bitch, because she's going to throw me out of my house. Like, they obviously kind of established that with that woman and her kids, and Mrs. Deagle, like, well, you can hope for money for Christmas because you're out on your ass, basically. Yeah. And she's this, like, they're building her up as this absolute villain, and then she just disappears. And I felt it was the same with Judge Reinhold. Yeah, like an absolute 80s stalwart, this character who everyone knows.
She doesn't disappear. She gets
she does get thrown out of a window or out of the roof.
Sorry, I wanted to go back because I had that written down on my list. The very first thing I had written down, because you already mentioned the scene in the kitchen with Billy's mum. And I've got written down that Mrs. Peltzer is a straight-up gangster.
I've got the same thing written down. Like, I've got written down that she's a badass.
Because she walks into that... Like, it's... All right, these things have hatched. They're causing havoc, but she doesn't know if they're evil yet. They're just playing around.
They look pretty evil.
Well, yeah, or they look evil, but they haven't done anything to harm her yet. So the first thing she does is blends one of them. She cooks one of them in a microwave. She stabs the shit out of another one. Again, Mrs. Peltzer is a straight-up gangster.
Yeah, and the thing is, even after she's killed the one, she's not like she's offset. Her next step is to pull another knife and to go two-bladed like a goddamn video game character. Yeah. She's ready to fuck someone up. It's only that sneaky one in the tree who kind of throws her off a kind of stride, as it were. But yeah, she turns from, like, let's be honest, quite dowdy mum. And let's be honest, put it this way, when I was thinking about it, I was like, where did this badass something come from? And I think it's the output of a long-suffering wife. She's had to put up with that absolute clown of a husband for God knows how many years, who clearly isn't earning a penny, pissing away the family savings while her son keeps a roof over their heads. And then, she's like the perfect wife. And she's like, oh, of course, dear. She doesn't want to mention the fact that none of his shit works. She takes his coat off, puts it on a hanger. I bet she grabs him his slippers. And now all of a sudden she's got this outlet, these little monsters in the kitchen, and she's going to kill the fuck out of them. And that is exactly what she does. Total badass.
You want to talk horror, right? I think the main aspect of horror in this is not the Gremlins, is not anything else. It's not Phoebe Cates' dad getting cooked in a chimney. It's the way Mrs. Peltzer and Billy look at these inventions that the dad makes when they're just about to use them. Like, it's the sigh when they're about to use the egg cracker. They both look at each other and think, okay. And then it's his pain when he's about to do the Peltzer peeler juicer. He puts only one orange. It's like Nightmare on Elm Street, the blood geyser. It's one person, but there's like about 9 people's worth of blood coming out.
It's just that with orange juice.
Yeah, pretty much.
Yeah. But I think the real horror isn't the fear of what's going to happen. I think it's what's said with their eyes. I think he knows it's not going to work. He looks at his mum, and what his eyes are saying is like, I was supposed to go to college, but I can't. She's like, yeah, I was supposed to marry Larry, but I ended up with your father and this fucking clown. And just all the time looking at each other, go, oh my God, how much money have we wasted? What a useless human being this dad is. And he's quite nice. He's quite pleasant. You see why people might stick around. But fundamentally, I mean, it's just not happening, is it? The dream's dead, dude. Get a job.
As much as like he's got no ability to be an inventor whatsoever, as you can clearly see. But my God, I love the dude's voice.
It's a great voice, and it's a weird one, because you think someone's like Joe Dante or Steven Spielberg, whoever's actually running the show here, was like, okay, we've got to use his voice more often. So we're going to have him narrate the film. But what we're going to do, we're going to have him narrate the intro for 10 seconds, and then we're going to have him narrate the outro for 10 seconds. It's like they forget for 99% of the film that he's supposed to be narrating it. It's a really weird choice.
But then, they throw in little bits during the film where he's just selling these things. It's that one where he sells a smokeless ashtray to that guy.
Yeah.
And it's hello, friend. My name is Randall Peltzer. And
you totally buy him as like the kind of charming salesman for sure. He just doesn't have the talent to back it up, sadly.
If he was a guy who was just selling Hoovers throughout the Midwest, he would probably make a lot of money selling the Hoovers.
That makes it all the more depressing. Like, he's clearly got a talent as a salesman. The problem is he's just selling his own shit. If he was selling quality goods, half decent goods, just goods that worked, he'd probably do really well. Yeah. They'd be able to move into a bigger house. Billy would be able to go to college, be able to quit that horrible job at the bank. And that job at the bank, I mean, you should never have to put up with the shit Mrs. Deagle says. I mean, the way she talks about his dog, like she wants to kill the dog, catch him and give him a slow, painful death. It's like, I love when she says, what did she refer to him as? A mangy cur? It's like, that is very old fashioned. But when she's talking about killing him and like the old guy in the background's clearly listening, like, yeah, that'd do it. Like everyone's on board because it's Mrs. Deagle. Everyone's terrified of it. But again, I as I said, I just find it bizarre at the start that I really feel like they're establishing a narrative of these evil characters who run the bank. Mrs. Deagle and a right-hand man in Judge Reinhold. I don't know what his character's name is in the film. And then they just go away. Like you said, obviously Mrs. Deagle returns to get thrown out of the roof or out the window, whichever way she went. But I can't remember. Judge Reinhold doesn't get killed. He doesn't come back at all. They just like, it's just a lot of action to establish that, Billy works in a shitty bank. To give you Mrs. Deagle has her own theme tune. A really aggressive Disney-esque theme tune. Yeah. It's like Cruella de Vil from 101 Dalmatians. And I'm just like, if you were watching it for the first time, I'm like, they are absolutely establishing her as villain number one of this piece. Like she's going to somehow end up siding with the goddamn Gremlins. And it's like, no, she just gets killed on a chairlift 45 minutes later. It's bizarre.
If you didn't have the theme tune, if you didn't have anything else, they're talking about the dog or whatever, the fact that she's walking the way she is with a decapitated snowman, you instantly go, that chick is evil.
Yeah, the same way with Darth Vader when he shows up. You don't need the music. As soon as you see him, you're like, yeah, he's the bad guy. Mrs. Deagle is this movie's Darth Vader, but she just gets dropped 10 minutes into the film.
They wanted to introduce somebody that you kind of cheer when they get thrown through a window on a high-powered stairlift, I guess.
It's too much of a gap, though. You don't like. I remember when I was younger. I don't think I necessarily put them together because she's in a house. She looks different as well because she hasn't got a hat on or makeup. She just looks like an old lady on a chairlift. Because of course you've been watching her walk around, so you're like, it's an old lady on a chairlift who gets thrown out of the window. Of course you can put the two together, but there's no kind of. I see what you mean. There's no cathartic moment. Like if she had been horrendous all the way through the movie, and then suddenly she gets thrown out of the building, dies, and they even kind of play up to the whole Wicked Witch of the West thing. I mean, there's two Wizard of Oz moments in this film. There's that and the bit with Stripe melting at the end, I'm melting kind of thing. So again, it is selling it as these are the movie's two big villains, Mrs. Deagle and Stripe. And all I can think is that in the edit, they were just like, listen, no one gives a shit about Mrs. Deagle. The Gremlins are fucking slaying it. Just get to the Gremlins. So I've got a funny feeling they did just look at it and went, we don't need the story about Miss Deagle owning the town. We don't need this other. We'll just get away from that, get straight to Mogwai, straight to Gizmo, and then to the Gremlins as quickly as possible. I suspect that's what's happened.
I think you might be looking a bit too deep into it, mine, just because they introduced her. You're like, I needed more Mrs. Deagle. I needed more. Like, I think you're looking a bit too deep into it. I think you're going way too deep. This film was all about the Gremlins just killing people. Did she name her cat Dollar Bill, by the way?
Yeah, she absolutely did.
Okay, just making sure. What that introduced as well is the fact that the Gremlins are meant to be very, very technically minded, I guess is the word. Like they can hijack a snowplow. He can turn, to quote Spinal Tap, he can turn a chairlift up to 11.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? Like
they've got some talent.
Yeah. They're able to turn all these things on in the kitchen before Mrs. Peltzer goes full on commando. But
yeah, and is it like a Borg-like situation? Because they get born and they're basically grown-ups immediately, aren't they? Or they are gremlins straight away. They kind of, first they're Mogwais and then they kind of become gremlins in this gestation period or whatever. But like you said, they can talk very quickly. they seem to have kind of basic kind of knowledge of machinery and technology. They seem to like to dress up. A few of them have clearly been watching movies. Like, there's one dressed as Flashdance. There's another one who's clearly got a fan of 40s and 50s film noir. It's a strange one for sure. And it's actually something that I like those moments, those kind of, and I think the film needs it, those kind of comedic moments. But one thing rewatching the first film in particular is that they're relatively limited. It really starts later on in the film, like the bar scene in particular. That's the scene when they really go for it, where they're all like dressed up and they're all singing songs and stuff like that. And it was the problem that the sequel had, despite it's a bizarre movie, the sequel, and we'll get to it in Legacy, is that it took the wrong part of the film. It forgot all the horror, it forgot about the family story, and put all the emphasis on the Gremlins being goofy. And it was the same issue, and we mentioned it before, obviously, with Ghostbusters. is that going from Ghostbusters 1 to Ghostbusters 2, they took the wrong part of Ghostbusters forward. And I think they did the exact same thing with Gremlins. But I think, again, it's another one of these movies that was a victim of its own success. It's not really a kid's film. It's pretty dark. There's a lot of violence.
Well, because
Gizmo's so cute. They're like, they want to sell it to kids.
But it was the film that brought in that, and Raid, was a Temple of Doom in '84 that brought in PG-13 because it was PG. But
they're both early '80s.
We mentioned, and I've never noticed it until this watching because you never really looked too much into it. But it's only Mr. Futterman that actually calls them gremlins because obviously it's a gremlin controlling technology. But they're not gremlins. Like, they're mogwai, aren't they? They're always mogwai.
Oh, well, they are actually mogwai, but I guess when they change, the idea is like to separate them, that they're gremlins. So I guess basically the Chinese guy doesn't know.
Gremlins, it's just Mr. Futterman, and we know that as a gremlin. Do you know what I mean? So
yeah.
And I also... And as you grow up, you go, oh yeah, they're mogwai, and then they evolve into gremlins, but they're not. They're still just mogwai.
Oh, I think they just made the name up because mogwai. I think you think of like the Chinese guy at the start of the film. Like the whole thing is he does have responsibility. It's like you are not ready for mogwai. You lack, all that nonsense. So it's like they just know them as mogwai because they're always cute because they take care of them supposedly. Although he looks a little bit like they're getting away with it. He's in the front of the shop. He's in a little box, whatever. But then after that, it's kind of like, well, we don't know what the hell they are now. So, of course, we'll just go with Gremlins. And I think Billy does refer to them as Gremlins at the end where he says, oh, he was right. They are Gremlins. I think it was Billy anyway. Yeah. But I'm still happy, even if it might not be kind of canon, I suppose. I'm still happy with Mogwais are when they're cute. Gremlins are when they're fucking gross. And when they get gross... Man, do they get gross? Because one of the most disturbing scenes of the film is just the eggs. I've never seen anything on film which instills such a sense of smell as like the eggs hatching. There's some of the way they crack and the smoke comes out and the color of them. I'm like, I feel like I can smell those eggs. I can imagine them opening up and smelling like rotten eggs. It's really and there's a lot of actually pretty gross stuff in this film.
Well, it's them and the face huggers from Alien, isn't it? Because you feel the same with those eggs, the way they open, you've got the ooze just slipping out of them, and again the smoke. Yeah, it invokes a smell that you can clearly imagine that would come with those eggs. It's absolutely, as you say.
Yeah, I got to be honest. I don't know with all these rules, and they're so easily broken. How the Chinese, and let's be clear, if we go back to the start of the film, there's obviously numerous questions about the rules and stuff. First of all, when Billy's dad, whose name I keep forgetting,
Raymond Peltzer.
Raymond Peltzer. When he goes to the store, Randall Peltzer, thank you. Yeah. He goes to what's supposed to be Chinatown, but what on screen is clearly being sold as Shanghai circa 1933. It's so fucking... There's even a sailor in the scene. It's bonkers.
With a burnt-out AMC Gremlin in the corner.
Yeah. I, honestly, that opening scene, I was like, Jesus Christ, it looks like he's gone back in time. And we've talked about it before, about that whole issue of, like, you go back to the 80s, and you have to deal with the kind of stereotypes of Chinese mysticism. And I think we came to the agreement that they get away with it in, say, something like Big Trouble in Little China, because if you really watch the film, the Chinese people are actually the competent ones. The traditional white hero is an absolute buffoon, but most people just didn't seem to want to see that. But in this film, Chinatown, they've made it look like 1930 Shanghai. And then they go into the shop, the dude's got the hat, the pipe, he's got one glass eye, or he's blind in one eye. I'm like, all right, it's a little bit on the nose, fellas.
So he's played by a guy named Keye, Keye. He was 80. That dude was born in 1904.
Yeah. Well, he looks like he belongs in that scene, in fairness.
Yeah.
Like, the only one who doesn't belong in it is Randall Peltzer. And that car, because it just doesn't look like the 80s at all. But, I mean, for one... The way they talk about the Mogwai at the start, Gizmo, whatever you want to call him, it's like the little kid who's clearly just dressed like Short Round from Indiana Jones. Clearly, another one of the many nods to Steven Spielberg's movies in this film. It's the fact that he goes, oh yeah, it's a Mogwai. Like, that's a normal thing. Like they're just fucking knocking about in China. And then he starts explaining the rules, and we will get into the rules, but all you need is to get a little bit of water onto one of these bastards and they multiply immediately, there should be billions of Mogwai. You're telling me that anyone who owns them is just like the best kind of Mogwai parent in the world and they never break any of the rules? Jesus Christ. How are there not billions of Mogwais?
I'm wondering if Gizmo is one of a kind, because all the other ones are pretty much evil. Like, he's patient zero, isn't he? He doesn't become... Like, would you feel... If they've never actually approached the fact that, has he ever been fed after midnight?
Well, obviously not, because they just become gremlins. So
if you do feed him after midnight, will he become a gremlin?
Yeah, well, that one of the big questions I got is, say if you, because I think in the original script, Gizmo was supposed to become Stripe.
Yeah. They was going to become him the same.
Yeah, but he was so cute that they wanted to keep him in the film, which I think obviously is a wise choice. But because Gizmo, like right from the off, when he gives birth, which isn't a very, like, the reproductive process isn't very fun at all. There's no sex. It's all boys.
And it's pain. It's pain.
It's painful. He's not very happy about it. But when he gives birth to all his brothers, whatever you want to call them, kids, I don't quite know the etymology of these things when it comes to Mogwai. But all the other ones are shithouses straight away. Obviously, Stripe's the worst, but they're clearly all bellends, and Gizmo's a nice one. So, say Gizmo went through the metamorphosis. Say he ate chicken at 1 a.m. Does he'll become a gremlin, sure, but would he be a nice gremlin?
That's why.
Would he still look gross but be cool? I don't know.
Is it? Because I have no knowledge other than Pikachu. But is there a Pikachu moment where Pikachu never evolves? Pikachu never becomes the other version.
Yeah. He never becomes like Raichu or whatever the other ones are called.
I don't know, mate. I mean, I couldn't tell you a Pokemon at all.
Well, he has like 2 or 3 kind of evolutions kind of thing. Okay. But of course, Pikachu's so cute. So Pikachu's can evolve, obviously, into these other versions. But that Pikachu in particular doesn't, because he's just too fucking cute. Yeah. Like, you can't have him evolve. He's the best. So, and I totally understand. And it's the same with when they looked in the film, like, we can't have Mogwai turn into a gremlin. Look how fucking cute he is.
But I'm really intrigued to see that next step, to see, like, if you made it now, or if you made a sequel, a Gremlins 3 or whatever, and you've got a Gizmo again, do you then realize that the only way to tackle the big bad evil gremlin is for Gizmo to eat after midnight and become his next state, and he is a good guy? And then would he, if he's good, would he revert back, or would he always be this?
He would just stay. I just assume it's kind of like, becoming a butterfly.
Because you never see the next step for them, do you? Because they all get...
No, I just assume that's it. Like, if you feed them after midnight, they just become a gremlin, and that's it. They're just stuck as a gremlin.
Although I will go back to a previous episode we did, and everyone thought that was it with the Tremors. But as we learned, there was lots of stages of a Tremors metamorphosis.
Well, yeah, I mean, if there had been 16 straight-to-DVD Gremlin sequels, we might have found out these completely inane details. But the thing is, one about those things, we're missing the most obvious question. I mean, obviously, the major rules are, don't let them get in light because that kills them. Don't get them wet because that just leads to tons more, like, Mogwais or Gremlins. And the big one is don't feed them after midnight. Now, this is very wishy-washy. So don't feed them after midnight. So when can you start feeding them again? Like, there's no, in the store with the Chinese guy, you think there would be a few more details. Just like, don't feed them after midnight. It's like, okay, so when can I start feeding them again? What about if I go through a different time zone? Do gremlins respect? Like, when I was in Canada, it was one of those odd things. I just drove through a time zone. It's like, if I drove through that time zone, and like I had my Mogwai with me, and Jesus Christ, I thought it was 11, it's gone 12. Does he respect the time zone, or is it, oh no, you're talking Gremlin City here, buddy? What happens if you get on a plane and go somewhere else? Is it linked to the stars, the sun? We don't know. And I don't think anyone knows. Randall definitely doesn't know. And I just find it a mirror. Like I said, these fuckers should be everywhere. They should be everywhere.
You have no issue with the fact that these things exist. You have no issue with that whatsoever.
My issue is daylight savings. Do they respect daylight savings, Rob?
They got an inbuilt clock that tells them exactly what's going on. Yeah,
I love it. It's like they don't respect daylight savings because they don't like farmers. It's just like one of those historic things. So no, you've got to watch out for that one. So yeah, the rules are a little bit wishy-washy. But as I said, I mean, the big issue for me, even the eating after midnight, fair enough. But just getting wet equals multiple gremlins.
Yeah, that one for me, right? Never get them wet. They're little balls of fur. They are going to get matted. They are going to stink. They are going to...
Well, it's like cats. Cats don't get wet. Like, they just lick themselves clean. In fairness, you never see Mogwai licking himself clean. But And do lizards really want to get wet? Because obviously when they turn into gremlins, they're more like lizards, aren't they? In terms of like, they've got that kind of like weird skin thing going on.
I don't think they melt if you get a lizard wet.
No, if you get light on them. No, as I said, I don't think the rules are... I'm not going to try and apply them to the rest of nature. But I'm going to go on the assumption that Mogwais, when they're all furry and stuff, that they lick themselves clean like a cat. You don't see it in the film. And I think a lot of that might come down to the, technological limitations of the time, which I think actually is another thing that benefits this film. There are a few bits which look a little bit ropey in 2021. But for the most part, again, because it's animatronics, I'm sure it was a nightmare to film. But it still looks great on screen.
Yeah, because this was
on screen.
This was like there was no CGI apparently in this film. It was all like, as you said, animatronics. So they cost between $430,000 per gremlin.
It's insane, and that's why supposedly they checked every staff member's bag, every crew member's bag at the end of the day to make sure nobody was stealing them because they were so expensive. They're like, listen, I know it's rude, but we can't have anyone taking one of these.
Because the gremlin I'd have to steal if I was stealing a gremlin, it's got to be, and I'm going to say the word again, it's got to be the gangster one in the pub that's got the the Santa hat pulled down, cut the eye holes in, and he's got a revolver.
He's going to shoot Billy. Oh, no, he's not shooting Billy. He's shooting Phoebe, isn't he?
Phoebe, yeah.
I keep calling her Phoebe.
But that's insane. But he's holding her at gunpoint for so long. Mm-hmm. And then she finally decides to move, and then he shoots. It was like he really didn't want to shoot her. He just wanted to hold her at gunpoint.
Well, I don't think he was expecting her to be so cool about it. Like, he's pointing a gun at her, and she just kind of waves her head back and forth. She doesn't look particularly panicked about it. She's just like, I'm just going to dodge this bullet. It's like, okay, Kate, you're very confident about this. Like, this isn't your first time. I mean, we already know there's a dark element to her past. Perhaps there's, shit she's not telling us. Maybe that's not the first gun pointing in old Kate's face.
So she knew her dad was up there. She thought, you know what, Dad, you're going to be up the chimney. I'm going to cook you. Do you know what?
I was more suggesting that dark part of the history meant that she was willing to go down a dark path, or maybe the fact that nothing else phases her after that. It's like if you stick a gun in her face, she's like, dude, I found my dad dressed as Santa with his neck broken behind the fireplace when I was 6 years old. And was like, God damn, you are a gangster, yo. But maybe not as gangster as Billy's mum, though, she's definitely the one who deals with her best.
We have said gangster in this film so much. But if I was nicking a gremlin, that would be the gremlin I nicked. Because I love the fact he took a Santa hat and just turned it into a balaclava. Found a revolver somewhere and thought, I'm going to be the mugging gremlin.
Well, that was one of the issues that I was watching with my wife, Beth, and I think I bring it up on every podcast. But the issue she had was, again, not that the fact that gremlins exist or any of this. She's like, where did he get the little coat from? Yeah. Where did he get the little coat from? The little Flash's coat? And then in the sporting goods store, which sells sporting goods / guns / toys, quite a bizarre place. She was like, where did he get the mini crossbow from? It's just like, suddenly I'm like, I don't know. Is it a kid's crossbow? I was like, maybe in that store it is.
It was, what was her name? The woman who got shot through the window, Mrs. Deagle. It was when she went out to chuck water on the carolers. And I hope she would have done them just to see more gremlins appear. But they're all wearing scarves, hats, earmuffs that fit them. So it's like they've just mugged a bunch of kids for their carol stuff.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
No, as you said, it's a
running home right now. This kid's running home. Just a bunch of little monsters just took my scarf and my hat, just mugged the shit out of me.
Yeah, they didn't get those from the store. They jacked a bunch of kids. I mean, you say that, or maybe they just killed them. I don't know. But like you say, it's weird with the Gremlins. Again, it's the tone part of the film. It's like, is it like a lot of the film? You're like, oh, it just seems to be kind of hijinks. They're rapscallions, they're up to no good. And then all of a sudden they flat out kill people. And you're like, oh, no, they're pretty bad.
Yeah, they're evil, yeah.
Yeah, like he runs over that guy and his wife with the tractor. Like, they're dead, for sure. Mrs. Deagle, 100% dead. No, again, though, Mrs. Deagle, you could say... What's that?
The guy and his wife, the one in the house.
Yeah. What's his name? Is it the guy who's talking about the
foreign, stupid foreign crap?
Yeah.
They're not dead. They appear in the sequel. Futterman.
Yeah, but how is it, like, literally that the gremlin gets a fucking tractor, drives it through the front of the house, and the last scene you see is that classic 80s kind of thing of them screaming as the tractor's coming towards them. Yeah. I know what you mean now. So I'm like, wait, I think they are in the sequel. But in that instance, so again, maybe it does play into the idea that they really are just...
They also call the cops, though, because he says, somebody just drove through the Futterman's house with their snowplow.
I just assumed someone else called.
No, they called the cops.
All I can remember from it, like the overriding memory, is it coming through the living room, those two running into the corner, and they're coming towards them, and that kind of last shot is them screaming as the camera's moving towards them, kind of implying that the tractor's going to run them over. But again, maybe it is just outside of Stripe. Most of them are just shithouses. Like, he's gone through the front of the house. He could have run them over, but then he stopped doing it, going, you thought I was going to kill you. Then he just run off and be gremlins. And even, I know they killed Miss Deagle, but I don't think even a gremlin could have known that would be the result of them fucking with a stair lift. They're just like, oh, we've just fucked with a stair lift. So we'll go up and down, she'll fall off, laugh, laugh, laugh. They don't think she's going to end up going through the goddamn window.
All right, hang on. I watched this a couple of days ago. Don't they blow the coppers up, though?
Maybe. So again, tonal inconsistencies with these gremlins. Some of them are like, well, we're just here to mess around. Other ones are there for just straight up murder, obviously.
The shithousest of shithouse coppers I have ever seen. Like,
they are shit.
We don't believe anything. Now we've seen Santa getting, for lack of a better word, gang raped by these bloody gremlins, and they've gone, let's do the window up. I want to go back to the station now. It's
just a shock, isn't it? It's like, Dave Mars, he does Christmas every year. It's just like, well, he's dead now, like right in front of you.
he does Santa every year. And he goes, what's he doing now?
What's he doing now? Yeah, sorry, that's the line. But yeah, the thing is, it is, again, a thing that runs through a lot of these 80s movies, are completely incompetent cops. I mean, I know it's a 90s film, like that was a big part of Home Alone, totally incompetent cops. Yeah. You go back to movies like Highlander, totally incompetent cops. Again, they're all over the place.
One of the incompetent cops, like Jonathan Banks, who is famous, I guess a lot of people would know him from Better Call Saul and Breaking Bad. He was the fixer now, wasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
But like he is through everything, and it's always weird to see him with hair now. But
it is weird. Yeah. It is odd. Yeah, some people, this won't mean anything to you because you don't like football, but the weirdest ones are people you assume are bald because you've always, like Martin Skrtel for Liverpool, and even to an extent Thiago Alcantara. It's like they just always had shaved heads, and then all of a sudden one day, they show you're watching football on the TV and they've just got like a full head of hair. And you're just like, what the fuck? If you had a hair, and they haven't had hair transplants, they always just bicked their head. That was just what they did. And you just, well, that seems a bizarre choice to me. So yeah, seeing hair where you don't expect it is pretty freaky.
He was also, I said, because I thought, I've mentioned him before. I'm sure I have, because he always plays like a shithouse person. He was Dr. Lizardo's nurse or guy from...
Akru
Bonsai.
Yeah, he was. I love that. He should have that on his IMB. Generally plays shithouse characters. Like, that's his shtick, you know. So how's your career going? Well, I've been typecast as a shithouse.
Yeah, I'm just a shithouse.
Stuck with this forever. What can you do? Yeah, I'm just a shithouse. But yeah, as I said, that scene in particular, like them in the bar, and then you kind of get the gremlins kind of running them back in town. That's really when the film, despite the fact that people are getting killed, is arguably when the film is at its kind of most lighthearted, most fun.
Yeah.
And it's only then after that it actually goes a bit more horror. I actually think the scene with Stripe and Billy, and as I already mentioned, that strange sporting goods / toy store / gun shop, it goes back to kind of full on horror there. Like Stripe shoots it. I remember again when I was younger, like the scene when Stripe shoots him in the arm with a dart or whatever, an arrow. Sorry, I was just like, God, that's pretty messed up. You know, and at that point, like you say, it kind of led to this PG-13 rating. But there are points in the film, and it's one of the great things about these 80s films where you're just like, I don't know what they're going for, and I'm not sure if they care. Is this a kid's film? Is this a film for an adult? And it seems tonally, it's very similar to another film Spielberg was involved in, but didn't direct, and that was Poltergeist. So I'm not sure if these films were like Steven Spielberg, especially at times like, listen, I'm not going to make this weird film, which is kind of for adults, but also kind of for kids, but I'll put my name to it, and we'll just let Joe Dante take the heat. But again, I think it's another one of those films, bizarrely, where I think if you asked a lot of people on the street who directed Gremlins, I think a lot of people would say Steven Spielberg. He's just so associated with it. Yeah, and his movies run all the way through this.
It's that Poltergeist question as well, isn't it? Like Steven Spielberg is presenting a lot in the 80s, but he's just presenting it. But it's how much did he actually have his hands on? Again, it goes back to who was the actual director of Poltergeist? Was it Spielberg? Was it Toby Hooper? Who was the actual director of this? And Joe Dante, in my opinion, is a very good director anyway in his own right. So,
oh yeah, I mean, another one of his films we should absolutely do. Like I loved growing up was Inner Space.
Oh.
We've gone for different ones. The Rocketeer I've only seen once, so I'd be willing to go back to that. But Inner Space, man, I watched that so many times.
I love Inner
Space.
I love that. I do love Inner Space, and I love The Rocketeer. So we might have to have a Joe Dante little fest going on.
Yeah. After this Joe Dante film, we'll get this one out the way first, of course. But no, the weird thing is, as well, I never knew, it was only when I was watching the credits at the start, that this film is actually written by Chris Columbus, which links it immediately to another film we've already done for this Christmas special, is Home Alone. Chris Columbus directed Home Alone, but he actually wrote this. And supposedly it was based on an idea of when he was in film school. He lived in a loft, and he had rats in the wall. And in the day, he said it was actually quite fun hearing them kind of scuttle around. But of course, at night, it's a lot more alarming, and that kind of gave him the idea of like, oh, you have these cute creatures in the day, like a mogwai, but when it gets to night, obviously, it doesn't fit perfectly. You have these gremlins kind of thing. So the idea that these rats, almost like they're not non-threatening in the day, but then at night, they're absolutely terrifying. So I thought that was a pretty cool kind of like conception for the idea.
I owe the director of The Rocketeer an apology as well.
It's not Joe Dante, is it?
It was Joe Dante.
I thought you were saying it with such confidence. I was like, when I think of Joe Dante, I think of The Howling, Toy Soldiers, stuff like that.
Yeah, it was Joe Johnston.
Oh, yeah, that's it.
We could full on complete Joe Dante's back catalogue in this podcast, by the way, because we've pretty much done. We've done Gremlins now. We've done The Burbs. So we could do The Howling. Explorers.
The Explorers too.
Yeah.
It's weird that you mentioned that, because I actually think tonally, I know it's not a Christmas film, but the closest thing to this is The Burbs.
Yeah.
Where it has its fun moments, but it really does lean into the horror. And I think Joe Dante, and again, that kind of Amberlin style experience of, yes, it's a kind of a kid-friendly movie, and it does have stuff for kids to kind of hang their hat on, as it were, with the Mogwais and the kind of picture-perfect town. But it's like when it leans into the horror, sure, it never goes full on. There's not tons of blood or anything like that. But it's happy to scare you, and that is both one of the things growing up. It's like, one, kids, I think, want to be scared, and it's just knowing where to draw the line. I think this does it very well. And another thing we already mentioned is like, Christmas is supposed to be miserable. Christmas, like, they seem to kind of fall hand in hand, like this idea of misery and then the happiness of Christmas. Like, to get the payoff in these Christmas films, like A Wonderful Life, like this, you need to have everybody be miserable first, and then they turn the corner, and then they appreciate the magic of Christmas. Or, how to be responsible owners of Mogwais. I'm not sure. The kind of messaging kind of gets lost at the end of this film. But yeah, it's amazing how many, like, the only thing I will ask, I suppose, is, do you consider this an outright Christmas film? In the same way that Home Alone is undoubtedly a Christmas film. A Wonderful Life, undoubtedly a Christmas film. Gremlins was actually released in the summer in America. No, but it's super Christmassy, but is it a Christmas film?
As much as Die Hard is a Christmas film, where they're set at Christmas, but you could watch them any time of the year.
Yeah, but the difference is here, Die Hard always had the thing where it's set in LA, and obviously Christmas is a part of it. But in this in particular, Christmas is like, it's just got a through line through this entire film. It's so prevalent. I think it almost pushes it into the realm of...
I think we said Christmas films are pretty much the spirit of Christmas. But this is not. This is just, it's set at Christmas, but it's not really.
No, I do agree. I was just kind of making a contrary argument. I actually totally agree with you that despite all the Christmassy stuff in it, it's a movie set to Christmas rather than a Christmas movie, which doesn't mean it's not a Christmas movie. The same is true. We're not saying Die Hard isn't a Christmas movie, but I think the thing we kept coming back to is the fact that, like Die Hard, I'd happily watch Gremlins Halloween. I'd happily watch Gremlins in March. I wouldn't watch Home Alone in March, but I would watch Gremlins in March because fundamentally the narrative is about Gremlins.
I think as well, what determines a Christmas film really is if it has a sequel. That it's again set at Christmas, or about, like, Home Alone again is Christmas. Home Alone 2 is Christmas.
Oh, Die Hard 2 is Christmas.
Yeah, that's what I mean. But Gremlins 2 isn't set at Christmas. Die Hard 2.
Yeah, but I would argue that Die Hard falls into the same bracket as this.
Yeah.
That's a Christmas film, but it's not a Christmas. Oh God, we're going to wind ourselves up.
Anyway,
we're going to tie ourselves in knots.
We might want to move on to the next segments, but there's one more thing I want to bring up before we go on to the next segment.
Billy kissing Kate. Yes, it is a disgrace, and I'm very upset that he got to kiss 1984 Phoebe Cates because he doesn't deserve her. Billy's an absolute fucking wetbag, dude. He's a wetbag.
Yeah, but if you look at the rest, if you look at all the pickings in that town,
yeah, I'll give you that.
Okay. There's not much going on. I mean, it's either Billy or it's Corey Feldman.
Yeah, but you kind of want to remind him, and it's like, whisper in his ear, Billy, you got her by default. By default, you didn't do anything awesome. You're just the best of a bad bunch. That's all it is.
So I wanted to bring up the fact that the thing that gets all the gremlins killed is Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah, it totally is. They love Snow White and the Seven Dwarfs.
Yeah. Like, of everything, that's the thing that gets them all killed, except for Stripe, obviously, because he's not stupid.
Yeah. No, he's the sharp one, obviously. But one of the things to mention as well before we wrap up the film is, why was the last scene of this film a matte painting? Why didn't they just have the old dude just walking down the street?
I think, was it to maybe just, I don't know, set the fact that it is a story? Maybe I think it goes into the fact that it's coming from a book, maybe? No,
that's good. Well, it would work. I guess it works in that moment because it's getting narrated again by Randall Peltzer, but the rest of the film hasn't been. So you have this kind of storybook.
Didn't the beginning start off as an illustration? I thought the beginning started off as an illustration and went into the...
No, I think the opening sequence is just him in Chinatown, I think.
Oh, okay.
But that has an otherworldly feel to it, the whole scene in Chinatown. And obviously the end has that storybook finish. So again, there's almost a suggestion that the beginning and end feel like they're from a different film. It's quite bizarre because the rest of the film doesn't have a storybook feel at all. The only storybook element, and it's by acts, I guess, more than design, is obviously the picturesque town. Yeah, which is obviously a very famous set. Was I guess next year was used as the set for Back to the Future.
Yeah, that's in fact.
Yeah. So there are elements to it, but as I said, I've got a funny feeling that this film did undergo some changes in terms of the tone and maybe the kind of the script late in the day. I keep coming back to Miss Deagle. I'm going to stop that.
Yeah, you have got a weird obsession with Mrs. Deagle.
Just so evil.
Just let her
see. So evil.
She was so evil, and she got her comeuppance. Whether or not she needed to be more evil until she got her comeuppance, you saw her. You didn't see her. She died.
You can't have anyone that evil for like 6 minutes of a film. It's insane. Anyway, let's just leave it at that. All right, facts it is then, I guess.
I know, and let's go to Love and Hate, shall we?
Oh, Love and Hate. Which, you're bringing that up because you know I forgot to do it, you son of a bitch. So you go first, obviously, and I'll just copy you.
Yeah, just go, I like that, yeah. No,
yeah.
So, I've already said it. I loved Randall Peltzer's voice. He could narrate anything. He should be up there with like James Earl Jones, with Morgan Freeman. Do you know what I mean? That is a good narration voice. I do like his voice. I love the creation of the look of the Gremlins. Obviously, they look fantastic. They do look just slimy and evil, and I love the way they look. And for the trifecta of characters who make brilliant noises, I love Gizmo.
Yeah. There's nothing wrong with loving Gizmo. That's Gizmo, the damn for sure.
Bobcat Goldthwait and Gutter Boy.
Well, the difference is here, of course, is that Gizmo is mega cute, and those two are absolute mutants. So that would be the primary. If you've got Mogwai singing his little song, Mogwai, and all that jazz, it's all super cute. If you've got Bobcat Goldthwait doing that same tune, dressed as a homeless person on the streets of New York, it's not as cute, dude. It's a very, very different. Imagine just having this film, only a Mogwai is Bobcat Goldthwait. And if you feed him after midnight, he gives birth to gremlins. It's a very different movie.
I would love for people to see your face right now. Every time I bring up Gutter Boy or Bobcat Goldthwait, you just go red. It's just not
very upsetting. Very upsetting. Well, on the spot.
Sorry, before you go, because I wanted to say, in regards to the bright light is used in our house a lot. If obviously you've just woken up and somebody turns around, you do go.
It's amazing. It's amazing we haven't kind of forced in more bad Gizmo impressions. Like the music, the bright, all that jazz. Yeah. Oh, see, we're doing it all now, of course.
Yeah, put it all into the last 5 minutes. Just keep going.
Yeah.
Red light.
We'll just carpet bomb the end of this podcast in horrendous impressions.
Yeah.
All right, so
if you can go, yeah.
Well, yeah, I mean, same as you. Like Gizmo, like he's such a great character. It's not just the fact that he's super cute. I love, and this leads into one of the other things I love about this film, the physical effects. It just gives the movie a weight. And in particular, you know, it's not like, I don't think it'd be the same if it was a CG character. You can see them holding him. And one of the things you see the dog reacting to him. And, you know, I know, you know, limitations, what is it? What's the saying I'm thinking of? Jesus Christ, one sec. If I don't say it, I'm going to go insane. Necessity, the mother of invention. Sorry, Jesus Christ, I was going to get there eventually. And I think you see that in films like this. It's like, obviously, they can't do everything. Yeah. But by having those limitations, it means they've got to be a lot sneakier with the Gremlins. And I think it leads to like a bigger kind of build up to what they look like, how they move and stuff like that. And yeah, sure, it means Gizmo can only do so much. But I think by having that physicality, I think that adds a huge amount to the film. And it makes him so much cute. I just don't think Gizmo's nearly as cute if he's 3D. I don't think he is. So yeah, Mogwai, physical effects, and I can't believe we haven't mentioned more Phoebe Cates. Phoebe Cates, just man, she's so beautiful. She's so beautiful.
I said it in last week's podcast, but I haven't said it here. But it seems to be a running trend for prepubescent me that I'm loving the brunettes, as it were, because oh my god, such a crush on Phoebe Cates. And randomly, Drop Dead Fred. I loved her in Drop Dead Fred.
Really? She had that kind of weird 90s haircut. I don't think it was quite as good as you're the only person picking Phoebe Cates in Drop Dead Fred over Phoebe Cates in Fast Times at Ridgemont High, put it that way.
Oh, no. Phoebe Cates in Fast Times at Ridgemont High is where it started. Don't fair
enough. I want to make sure that like an error hadn't been made.
If you're not watching Phoebe Cates get out of a swimming pool, whilst, again, Judge Reinhold, of all people,
Judge Reinhold shows up again, gets a proper role. He doesn't just disappear like he does in this film. No. Speaking of which, that'll take us directly into what we hate about this film. So I'll let you again go first because, again, I'm making this up on the fly.
Yeah, but you've already started it. Judge Reinhold's I'm here and now I'm not. That was the weirdest thing. That just pointless. The coppers, absolute shithouses. Like
they really are
whatsoever. And I think that hate is a strong word. We've gone love and hate, but it didn't really feel like there was much in regards to the end battle with Stripe. It seemed like it could go a bit further for me.
Like it was a bit low key, kind of thing. Like he just died very quickly, like the whole Sunshine thing.
So I felt like that could have been drawn out just a little bit more, a bit more stakes, as it were, in regards to why he's evil before he gets taken out. So yeah, I wasn't big on the way they ended Stripe, because I mean Stripe is just a great character anyway. I mean, we haven't mentioned he is a great character. His look is fantastic. He's the only one who keeps his hair pretty much, and it's just right down. But he looks great, and so yeah, I think he needed more. So I didn't like the way that ended for him. He needed more.
You don't like the fact that Stripe went out like a bit of a punk.
Yeah, he needed more of a threat. He needed to cause more of a threat before he went, So that was
I know what you mean. I mean, obviously, Mrs. Deagle not getting, showing up and disappearing, and the same thing for Judge Reinhold.
Are you sure?
Questionably.
I haven't heard you mention that at all.
I know, it's ridiculous. My other big issue, I suppose, is, I don't hate him, but Billy's a bit of a kind of wishy-washy character. I don't think there's any surprise that the Gremlins went on to have this kind of long tail, this, long history, major legacy. But Billy, what's the name of the character who played Billy?
Zach Galligan.
That guy, did he really go on to do much else other than this? It wasn't a huge amount. And I was just like, I'm not sure if he's got a great deal of screen presence. And again, I'm being harsh because I know I called him a wet bag because I'm jealous that he got to kiss 1984 Phoebe Cates. But I just think he's a so-so character, that's all. But other than that, it's like I really do love this film.
So he steadily acted. I mean, not in a lot of things that we know, but he has steadily acted. But then Phoebe Cates hasn't. She went up until like 1994, maybe, and then she played Kate again in like a Lego Dimensions thing. But yes, so 1994.
But she walked away from acting, I think, rather than
did she?
being forced out of it. I think so, yeah. I've got that in my head. I haven't actually checked that up, so apologies if I'm wrong. But I've got it in my head.
Her last film was Princess Caribou.
Yeah, because you know, even if she wasn't in big films, the idea that Phoebe Cates in the mid-90s couldn't have got any work seems absolutely absurd. So I have to assume that she just kind of walked away from acting.
Fair enough. Yeah, that makes sense.
Okay, cool. All right, so on to facts. Do you have? I've got quite a few, but if you want to go first.
Yeah, I got a few as well. I just want to say, so she shifted away from acting to focus on raising her kids. So
yeah, I thought it was something like that. Yeah, cool. I just didn't want to say it without like knowing, because I was like, I think it's because she went to raise kids, but it sounds so sexist if I just assume, and I was totally wrong. So yeah, I don't want to be a dick, that's all.
So you've alluded to her a couple of times. The set for Kingston Falls is the same one used for Back to the Future. Both movies were filmed on the Universal Studios backlot. Originally, Stripe and Gizmo were the same character. This changed when executive producer Steven Spielberg insisted one of the Gremlins be a good guy, with whom the audience could identify. Director Joe Dante expresses that this decision was the reason why the film is fondly remembered. The Santa speech proved to be controversial, and studio executives insisted upon its removal because they felt it was too ambiguous as to whether it was supposed to be funny or sad. Director Joe Dante, however, stubbornly refused to take the scene out, saying it represented the movie as a whole, which had a combination of horrific and comedic elements. Executive producer Steven Spielberg did not like the scene, but despite his creative control, he viewed this movie as Dante's project and allowed him to leave it in, which kind of answers to the fact as well, how much did Spielberg have? If he's so he's producing, but he's letting Dante have the control.
No, we made a joke about it, and Spielberg like fingerprints are on this film, but this does feel like a Joe Dante film to me.
Yeah, I like this. This is Spielberg all over again, because this was the same as, I think it was was it Spielberg and Back to? Yeah, it was when he sent the notes to the producer. One of the studio notes to director Joe Dante and executive producer Steven Spielberg on seeing the first cut was that there were too many gremlins. Spielberg suggested cutting them all out and calling the movie People.
yeah. Again, Spielberg, I mean, from like what, 81, 82 onwards, it's like he's just got all the power.
Yeah,
he does what he wants.
An earlier attempt to have monkeys play the Gremlins was abandoned because the test monkey panicked when made to wear a gremlin head. I mean, come on.
Dude, I mean, I could have just sent them a video of me trying to put like a suit or a hat on one of my cats, and how they just freak the fuck out. Try and put one of those on a monkey. Jesus, wet.
So Zach Galligan recounted in an interview that when the movie was made, there was no CGI, so all of the Gremlins were animatronic and costing between $30 and $40,000. When everyone left the lot for the day, security would have everyone open the trunks of their cars to make sure they weren't stolen.
Nice.
At least one of Phoebe Cates' screams in the scene at Dory's Tavern is genuine. An enormous cockroach crawled out in front of her during a take. After watching Tim Burton's earlier short films, Steven Spielberg considered him to direct the movie. He decided against it, however, because at the time Burton had never directed a full feature-length movie. It
feels like it could have been a Tim Burton film. Oddly, we mentioned that last week with Scrooge. Not necessarily Scrooge, but how Tim Burton back in like the late 80s, early 90s would have been a great fit for A Christmas Carol. And you watch, and don't get me wrong, I'm not saying this at the expense of Joe Dante. Joe Dante's done a fantastic job and it's a great movie. But you can totally see Tim Burton making this film. It would be slightly different, but yeah, he'd make it work for sure.
Chris Columbus' script went through a few drafts before shooting. His original version of the Gremlins killing the dog and cutting off the mum's head and tossing it down the stairs. These elements were never shot due to the fact that director Joe Dante and Warner Brothers wanted the movie to be more family-orientated.
Shit. How dark is that? Kill the dog and then murder the mum and throw her head down the stairs. I mean, the only thing darker than that is Phoebe Cates' fucking story.
Could we call her a gangster if she gets her head chopped off and chucked down the stairs after that?
No, I think you lose marks for sure. You lose your gangster marks if you get decapitated and your head thrown down the stairs. It's just not the same.
Your favourite character, Mrs. Deagle, the richest lady in town, have named her cat after different kinds of currency, including kopeck, ruble, peso, drachma, and dollar bill.
Nice.
If you're obsessed with money, that's how you prove it.
That is how you deal with it, yeah. That and cats. I love money and cats. Combine the two, it's genius.
This I question a lot. Director Joe Dante prefers Gremlins 2 to this movie. Like, how?
I don't know. We'll get to that in Legacy, but I don't know how anyone would prefer Gremlins 2 to Gremlins 1, personally.
After the film's release, director Joe Dante stated, "I still have no idea why this picture was successful." I mean, he had no faith in this film whatsoever, did he? Let's be fair.
The big draw, it's a big draw. It's like it's the same with like video games and stuff. Like if you get the mascot right, you're kind of halfway there. And that's what they did. Like you have the post, obviously the poster doesn't have a Mogwai, but it's got the cute little hand coming out. People would have seen the Mogwai. It's a great premise. And they nailed the character design. You know, we talked, I know it's a very different film. We talked about it with Predator. Would Predator have been the same hit if they had ended up with that Jean-Claude Van Damme in a suit kind of vibe?
Yeah.
Perhaps not, because as great as Arnie and the other guys are in it, a big part of that film is the fact that the Predator fucking kicks ass and just looks fantastic. So yeah, I appreciate the Predator and Gizmo are very different beasts, but visually, aesthetically, it's an easy film to sell on the strength of this adorable little Furby thing.
We said as well about Randall Peltzer, Hoyt Axton, how he would be a fantastic salesman.
Yeah.
Like this gives it a bit more gravitas, mind, because though he followed the basic outline of the script, Hoyt Axton is said to have improvised nearly all of his lines.
Oh, really? Well, it doesn't matter when you've got a voice like that, does it?
Yeah, but that's just him. So all the things he's coming up with, all the like salesman pitches and stuff, that apparently that's him. So that
just doing his thing.
That gives it a bit more gravitas to the fact that I thought he did really well at that, even though he was selling some shit products.
Yeah, as I said, you know, and that's what makes the whole family dynamic so awkward. They know he could go out and achieve, but he just will not give up this dream, which clearly isn't going to work because he has no talent as an inventor. But hey ho.
That's me for facts, mate. So unless you got any.
I mean, some of them are just, I mean, there are a whole bunch of kind of Spielberg nods throughout this film, right from the unsubtle one, you know, with the radio station, Indiana Jones at the start. But when Billy's walking through town at the start of the film, he walks past the cinema. The two films showing are A Boy's Life and Watch the Skies. These were both working titles for E.T. and Close Encounters, which I thought was pretty cool. I mean, you see Spike hides behind an E.T. toy next to all the, you know, WB-friendly Looney Tunes, which I thought was pretty cool. Although I don't think it's that cool because I'm not a big fan of E.T. And my mum actually bought me an E.T. like cuddly toy, and I couldn't say anything because it was a gift, but I don't like the look of E.T. I just don't like it. So yeah. I certainly didn't want him kind of knocking around in my bedroom. You've already mentioned Staff Bagged. There's a very unsubtle Spielberg cameo, which somehow I'd never mentioned before at the Inventors Convention. Because it's one of those like...
He's the guy in the wheelchair.
Yeah, or whatever the hell it is. It's almost, the little vehicle that drives past kind of thing. And I think it's one of those like, your emphasis is so on the character and he goes so clearly through the middle of the scene that it's so obvious that you almost miss it. And the dartboard scene where Gizmo is pinned to the dartboard and the Gremlins are throwing, obviously, darts at him, was supposedly inspired by the crew because they hated Gizmo so much because the animatronics kept breaking on him. So he was driving everybody crazy. So they're like, we're going to throw fucking darts at the little shit instead. But that's pretty much it for me. In terms of soundtrack, we've already mentioned the importance of the soundtrack to this film. Jerry Goldsmith, who's come up on this podcast a few times, he's worked on the Star Trek films, the Alien Saga, Rambo, Poltergeist, The Burbs. And again, I would actually say The Burbs, and perhaps it's because he's working with Joe Dante again, is the closest thing to this film in terms of capturing that tone, where the music, you'll notice in The Burbs as well, is really prevalent as well, the score. And it's because it's establishing the tone, because it knows it's supposed to be a family film and it goes dark, but the music keeps reminding you on a regular basis. That's like, this isn't a horror film though. It's like when you're watching in this film, when Billy's having a fight with Stripe or when the Gremlins are up to no good, the music, even though kind of dark, is still quite playful. And I think it's a massive part of this film is that score by Jerry Goldsmith of ensuring that it never gets too dark. You know, even when it is getting quite violent, there's still, the score is telling you, oh, this is quite playful violence rather than, oh, this is a legitimate horror film and you should be terrified.
Yeah.
But I think he does a fantastic job. In terms of legacy, obviously the Gremlins has lived on for years with, you know, toys, video games, all sorts, you know, pretty much everything you can stick a gremlin on, or more specifically a Mogwai on, a Mogwai has been put on. I have a Mogwai notepad, I have a Mogwai mug. Those are in my house alone. But really what I think of when I think of obviously the legacy of this film is Gremlins 2, and I think you've already alluded to it. It's a strange-ass film, the sequel, really strange.
And one of the main characters, I think his name is Mr. Clamp, played by John Glover, who was Bryce Cummings from last week's Scrooged, which
playing a very similar character.
Yeah. But he's a bit nicer in well, he turns out to be nicer. But Gremlins 2, yeah, it was like, you said it already during this recording. They took the wrong part of Gremlins to put into the sequel. Like, they concentrated more on the Gremlins and more on the comedy aspect of it. I mean, to the point where you've got Dracula doing guerrilla journalism through Gremlins 2. Do you know what I mean? It's completely insane. It
doesn't all work. No, it doesn't all work. I mean, they've basically taken the bar scene and turned that up to 11.
But it does. We've said it before as well. A lot, like with Freddy from Nightmare on Elm Street and with Jason from Friday the 13th, a lot of the character development of those characters you pull from not the original film, but further sequels. If you think of Gizmo, you will think of Gizmo with a Rambo bandana,
100%,
a bow and arrow. All from you're not going to think of him from Gremlins 2. You're going to think of him from Gremlins 1. You're going to think of him from Gremlins 2.
Yeah. 100%.
So, like his character development.
No. I totally agree though, because it is one of those. The reason it doesn't work as a film, and it's similar as we mentioned before to Weekend at Bernie's 2 rather than Weekend at Bernie's 1. Most of the moments you actually remember are, funny enough, from the second film, which isn't nearly as good as the first.
Yes.
And it's because it just keeps going to try and establish moments. It keeps trying to create iconic moments, but at the cost of the movie. And the other issue I have with this film is that it appears to be set in the future. It's really odd, like that building, everything about it. It kind of has this kind of like futuristic design thing. It's like you think about the first film, it's almost like a movie. I know it's, it was filmed in 1984, but like a lot of films around that time, there was this obsession with 50s Americana. And in many respects, it felt like an old film in the 80s because, you looked at that town and you almost, like if someone said, oh, this could have been set, put this way, it's no coincidence they use that as a set for 1955 set Back to the Future, It totally felt like an old-fashioned film. And then with Gremlins 2, they've gone right the other way. And suddenly they're working in an office building, which looks like it's come from 2037.
Well, that's because,
it's so fucking weird.
They're in New York, aren't they? It's like 6 years later. Well, it was filmed in released in 1990. So they've gone to New York. So yeah, they have like it's like people out of their time, like Phoebe Cates and Zach Galligan are people out of their time because they come from their small town and now they're in this big city and they're still trying to keep their small town mentality.
Yeah. But they've kind of gone so extreme. Like I totally agree because they're like, oh, this is the 80s, but it's small town, so it feels more like the 50s. And then you've got these small town people go into the big city in the early 90s, but instead of feeling like the 90s, it feels like it's 40 years in the future. It's, as I said, I think it's a very strange film. I don't hate the sequel, and it does have good moments, as you said. Like Gizmo has a lot of his most iconic moments, and despite them going overboard with the whole Gremlin shtick, like I love the smart Gremlin who ends up doing like the talk show and stuff. I think some of that stuff is really good, but as a movie, I just don't think it really works in the same way.
It's not a terrible sequel. It is watchable by a mile, but to prefer that over the original, especially as the director, it's probably because the director maybe more of his ideas got used in the sequel. That's probably why he preferred it.
It could have been. Well, we do live in a world where some psychos prefer Ghostbusters 2 to Ghostbusters. And this is one of those examples. This very much to me, and I think it was the same distance. I think it was 6 years between Ghostbusters and I think they were both the same year as well. They were both 84, the original. And I think both their sequels were 1990.
I think Ghostbusters 2 might be 91. But I may be wrong.
I thought it was 90. I might be wrong. I had it in my head that they were both 6 years apart from the originals. But either way, they're both kind of, you're looking at a similar kind of time distance between the two films.
Oh, we're both wrong.
1989?
89.
89, all right. Well, it was close anyway. But they both make the same mistakes. They both take the wrong elements. And I think, again, I mentioned it in the podcast, I think in both instances, they were a victim of their own success and they wanted to lean more into a family-friendly film, remove some of the scares, lean into the iconography. Yes, it led to moments. And again, Ghostbusters 2 in and of itself, it's a decent enough film. But some of the magic's lost. The darkness of the original Gremlins, the satire, the nastiness, if you will, of the original Ghostbusters, both lost in the sequel. So a bit of a shame. And probably the reason that, that was that despite the popularity of Gremlins, we've had nothing since 1990. We're talking 31 years. It's insane. Yeah.
And you think it's rife for, in a world where you're still getting Critter sequels,
Yeah. Well, that is the problem. I think Warner Brothers are probably a lot more protective over Gremlins than whoever makes fucking the Critters. Don't get me wrong, I love the first Critters film.
We are so doing Critters on this podcast.
We probably should. We probably should do.
Taken out at some point.
Yeah, and we can talk to the one person who's seen every Critters sequel. There was a recent Critters sequel. There was one that came out
There's Critters Attack.
Yeah.
And there's a Critters
of course you know them.
I haven't seen.
There's a Critters TV show.
Critters TV show.
That's it. Don't say anymore. We'll save it. We're definitely doing a Critters podcast down the line, 100%. Because just like a lot, like Tremors, for instance, I have such fond memories of the original film. But like most people, I knew when to stop. I was like, that was good. I don't need to see any more. You went out and watched the 17 sequels in the TV show. So we'll get around to the Critters eventually.
I watched all 4, obviously, but I don't think I've watched Critters Attack or Critters and New Binge, which is the TV show. But again, we'll cover all this in the Critters.
We'll get that eventually.
Yeah.
In terms of the final categories, video games as usual. I mean, there is actually one cool little thing, and it's provided our Welsh link for this week. Actually, it's
tenuous going out of your way to find Welsh links now.
Oh, and this really isn't a Welsh link. This is just a more personal link of something that happened to me in Wales. But you see the Gremlins in the bar. They're playing the original Star Wars arcade game from 1983. And that was the first arcade game I ever played. And I have such vivid memories of going to the same arcade that Nessa works in Gavin and Stacey. And there was a room at the back where they had the arcade, but it was the full one, the one you sat in.
Yeah.
And I met, like, one of my overriding memories of going to Barry Island, which is a beach town not far from Cardiff, where I grew up, was playing that arcade machine. So, of course, when I saw the arcade machine, I immediately thought of Barry Island, and hence the rather tenuous, stretched link to Wales this week.
My God, but, you took 1 and 1 and made 11 on that.
I know, I really did. In terms of the video games for this, there was one for the Atari in '84.
Yeah.
The one I knew certainly growing up was Gremlins 2. Released in 1990 for the NES, the Game Boy.
The one I always had Gremlins 2 on the Game Boy. And I could never get past the second level ever.
Yeah, it's one of those games because I remember when the Game Boy first came out. One of the kids, we were on a bus trip to Oakwood. See, I'm linking it to Wales again. And he had one of the games he had was Gremlins 2 for the Game Boy. And I remember looking at it and being like, man, that looks so cool. Because I'd never seen a Game Boy before, and suddenly seeing like the Gremlins on a portable device, I just found it amazing. But I don't think the game was actually all that good, to be honest. But, it is what it is. At the time, it seemed pretty cool. There was also Gremlins Unleashed for the Game Boy that was released later, and Gremlins Strike versus Gizmo, which is a Game Boy Advance game. So there haven't actually been, I'm sure there have been a bunch of mobile games, but we're not going into those. But in terms of like a big budget, certainly, Gremlins game, there's not been anything since, the 90s, even the Game Boy Advance game, which was, obviously a bit more recent. I mean, we're still talking 20 odd years ago. There hasn't been much to work with there. But I mean, in terms of what I would go for, I think you've really got to lean into the whole Gizmo thing. Him, I mentioned it earlier about him being a mascot. And I'm like, do I want to see them recreate the movie? I'm like, no, basically back in 1990, even in '84, what you got was a mascot platformer where you jumped around and collected shit. It's like, just do that again, but just have Nintendo. Again, it's never going to happen. You're never going to get Nintendo EDA in Tokyo making basically Mario Galaxy, only Gizmo Galaxy, or him running around town collecting shit while fighting Gremlins. But it would be cool, and you could have different themed levels based on his imagination, because obviously this film has so many classic movies like playing in the background.
Yeah.
And you could have him as the race car driver, and you could have it in black and white, and you could have another one where he's Rambo, but it very much looks like Rambo 2, so it has like the soft lighting and everything. Really lean into the movie style of it, kind of thing, but very much with Gizmo as the kind of playable character. So that's what I would go for.
So I got 2. And the first one would be Ratchet and Style-esque.
It's not a million miles away.
Or Jack and Daxter X, where he is. There are mini levels where you control Gizmo and go through, but then you've got, I guess it's Billy. Gizmo's just in your backpack all the time, and you're doing the missions through whatever it is. So that one, but the one I'd really like to see, if we're stretching it, there's a game called My Friend Pedro. Have you ever heard of this?
I've played My Friend Pedro, yeah.
Yeah. So My Friend Pedro, for people that don't know it, it's basically about a guy that wakes up and he's hearing a voice, and the voice turns to be a sentient banana.
Yeah, it's a really good game.
Yeah. So, and then this guy just goes through basically town killing gangsters because Pedro was telling him to do it.
Mm-hmm.
So I'd quite like to see that, where the gangsters are the Gremlins and Billy's just going full.
Oh, so you like he's kind of like having a nervous breakdown. Maybe he thinks Gizmo's trying to tell him, almost like a kind of like Detective Pikachu, but a much darker version. So all of a sudden he's the only person. Or maybe you could even have the fact that, because I got the impression maybe at the end of the film that Mogwai or Gizmo can speak, but he can speak Mandarin. Because it sounded like he was very much speaking to the old dude, and it sounded like they might have been speaking Mandarin. I might be wrong.
Yeah.
So perhaps Billy learns Mandarin. Turns out Gizmo is a straight-up killer, and he's like, listen, I can't do it. I'm 1.5 feet tall, and I'm covered in fur. But Billy, you could go out there and you could kill these motherfuckers. So gives him a gun, sends him on his way, and it ends up just being a super violent action platformer where Billy is killing gremlins. And maybe, a few bystanders, who knows?
Because let's be fair, gremlins die in pretty spectacular ways, and there's a lot of green blood flying around in this film.
Mm-hmm,
so you could have some fun with it in a My Friend Pedro-esque game.
I'm all for it. I think your one's the best one, so go with that one this week. my friend Gizmo. We'll go with that.
I like it.
Yeah.
Have you got to the end of My Friend Pedro?
No, I haven't. No, it was one of those games, like, I really enjoyed it, but there's tons of games which I've enjoyed. I played like 3 or 4 levels and then just kind of dropped off. It wasn't because it was bad. I enjoyed it, but just never
the end of the game. The end of it. Spoiler alert, but I am going to spoil it for you. The end of it. The silent protagonist pulls his mask off. Mm-hmm. And he is Pedro, so Pedro was a figment of his imagination. So the end of My Friend Gizmo is the same, where Billy pulls his mask off and he's really Gizmo underneath.
Oh, so I thought you were going to do it the other way around. Like he goes into his bag and there's no Gizmo in there, and really he's just been talking to himself. And Gizmo's been dead for, because it's 2021. Gizmo's been dead for like 15 years.
Okay, we'll go with that one then. Yeah, no, we'll go with that one. Yeah.
Gizmo doesn't really exist. Gizmo's been dead for a long time. So instead, he's just been talking to himself in bad Mandarin for an entire video game, shooting up strangers.
Yeah.
Let's just go with that. All right, fantastic. All right, so that's it for this week. We'll just do quickly the ratings and recommendations. From my side, obviously, in terms of recommendations, it's still super easy to recommend. This is one of my favorite Christmas films, and beyond that, it's one of my favorite like sci-fi, I guess you'd call it, / horror / family movie from the 80s. It is one of my favorite 80s films. I'm always surprised to hear that some people still haven't seen Gremlins somehow. I just thought that was one of those films you just kind of have to watch before you turn 12, but apparently some people haven't seen it. But yeah, if someone says to me they haven't seen Gremlins, of course I recommend that they watch it, because I still think it's a fantastic film. I tell them to steer clear of the sequel, of course. And in terms of ratings, it's a tough. I'm going to go with 4 stars, but it's a strong 4. It's a 4.5, as Rob might say. But I am going to say I'm going to stick to my system and say 4 stars for this film. But it's a very, very strong 4 stars.
Agreed. I would recommend it to anyone. It's an easy watchable film. It's enjoyable. It's so much fun to watch. You can watch it whenever. It doesn't have to be watched at Christmas.
No.
It's also, I found out, it's the last film in my wedding table name.
Awesome.
So when we got married, when me and my wife got married, we didn't have table numbers. We had table names, and each table name was the name of an 80s film. And we have covered them all now. Gremlins was the last one.
Fantastic. And that is the thing, even though I'm giving it 4 stars, it's a really good film, but the one thing it is unequivocally is super iconic. I have such an attachment to it from when I was young age. When I'm rating it, I'm thinking of somebody approaching it now, coming from 2021, if they've never seen it before. And I'm not sure it is a kind of stone cold 5-star film, but it's a really, really good film, a really well-made film, really well acted, and super charming, and obviously in parts super dark, which I think gives it quite a bit of character. So yeah, I'm sticking with 4 before you say...
Yeah, no, it is. You've already rated it. It's 4.5, mate.
Oh, 4.5, son of a bitch. Of course it is.
It's 4.5.
It's one of those weeks I'm not going to disagree with you.
It's not 5. It's so good. But it can't just be 4. There are elements in it which kind of makes it drop down a little, because I think we 5-starred the last 2 of this Christmas spectacular.
I didn't.
Didn't you? I know you 4.
I think I gave Home Alone 5 and Scrooged 4, and I'm giving this a 4 as well.
Both of them then.
Yeah.
There's a couple of things that kind of make this just drop down a little bit. So, but it's 4.5 all the way.
Yeah, well, like I said, we're kind of nitpicking to a certain extent, whether it's a 4-star film, whether it's a 5-star film, whether it is indeed a 4.5-star film. The fact of the matter is that it's really good. it's still totally recommendable. It's still totally watchable. And if you haven't seen it, or even if you haven't seen it for a long time, treat yourself and watch it this Christmas, because there's no better. Even though you can watch it in March, I still think it's at its best if you do watch it at Christmas. Yeah. So yeah, give it another go. But that's the third part in our 4-part Christmas podcast spectacular. So the last choice is down to you, sir. Actually, it's not. It's actually down to Dave, isn't it?
Yeah. So you're coming home. You'll be home when we record the last one in our 4 episodes. Mm-hmm. So we decided we're going to bring Dave back, who was with us for the Total Recall episode. And we all had a really good time doing it. So we've asked Dave what he wanted to do. So we've stretched Christmas again a little bit because it's set at Christmas. But also, it's a film that we all like, I'm sure. And it's an action film because we're all action film fans, action 80s film fans. So he's actually chosen Lethal Weapon for us.
Yeah, which is, don't get me wrong, I mean, if it wasn't for the fact that we knew Dave was wanting to do Lethal Weapon and we knew we were going to do it at Christmas, we might have done this a while ago because we're both massive Lethal Weapon fans. Yeah. But I think this film does indeed stretch the idea of it being a Christmas film the most of all the films we've done. I don't think it's as unequivocally a Christmas film as, say, something as Die Hard. But again, that's something we'll cover next week. So Lethal Weapon, absolute classic of 80s cinema. Is it a classic Christmas film? I guess we'll decide next week. But do join us for the last part of our Christmas special, where we will have Dave will be joining us, and we'll all be in the same room together, and hopefully there'll be quite a few drinks going around. So it might have a slightly different vibe, but it should be fun. But as always, thanks for listening to this podcast. Please join us next week. And of course, everyone, have a Merry Christmas.
Bright light, bright light.
Oh, yeah. And before I forget, because I always forget, here's Rob telling you where you can actually find us.
Yeah, so we're currently on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter under Hey You Guys 80s or at Hey You Guys 80s. And we're also on email at heyyouguys80s@gmail.com. Please feel free to drop us any emails, any recommendations, or any reviews you have. But whilst we're on about that, wherever you get your podcasts, please also smash the subscribe button. Yes, I said smash.
It's fine. Don't worry about it. It's fine.
Leave us a review and leave us some 5-star ratings as well. But make sure they're 5-star ratings.
Yeah. We're not interested in 1-star, 5-star. If it's not going to be 5-star, don't go smashing anything. Just leave your opinion to yourself. 5-star ratings only. But yeah, if you could do that, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks, guys.
Thank you. See you next week.